Ukraine. Now, did I not tell you that the other side was going to play dirty to distract from the Occupy America movement that's going on out there? They can't find a handle on it. They can't fit it into a pigeonhole. It's like trying to grapple with a cloud. And I've been saying all along for these last several weeks, expect the other side to play dirty. And along those lines, I remember I said that the party with the most to lose in the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy America protest was Israel, that are in an absolute panic over Occupy Wall Street being a direct threat to their constant sucking of money out of your pocket, Israel's control over the United States war machine, and, of course, control over the United States veto at the United Nations Security Council. And sure enough, the dirty trick just happened. The U.S. has got this guy in Texas who's a U.S. citizen but supposedly has an Iranian passport, blah, 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 blah. He's part of this terror plot. He was going to assassinate the Saudi ambassador. And the media's been totally focused on this all day long. No mention about the economy, no mention about the wars, no mention about Occupy Wall Street, of course. Even Michael Jackson's doctor has been relegated to limbo because of this thing. They've been pounding on it as hard as they can all day long. So the official story from Washington, D.C. and the media is forget all about Fast and Furious, and forget about the economy, forget about the wars, and forget about the mortgage-backed securities fraud, forget about Occupy Wall Street, forget about oil still leaking in the Gulf of Mexico and radiation washing up on the Pacific coasts. We have terrorists for you again. Ooh, scary Iranian terrorists. Booga, 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 booga. That's basically what they're talking about. Now, the official story is, let me get into this a little bit. They're calling it Operation Red Coalition. And remember, we've had all these so-called terror attacks that turn out to be entrapment, where some undercover informant talks some losers into it and gives them everything they need. Then they get arrested. And, there's headlines saying, oh, remember, Muslims are bad. Muslims are evil. You must hate them, and so forth and so on. So here's the official story out of this one. This American from Corpus Christi who has an Iranian passport, we are told, supposedly approached a DEA informant looking for the help of a Mexican drug cartel to assassinate the Saudi ambassador inside the United States of America. Because, of course, we all know how legendary Mexican drug cartels are at assassinating Middle Eastern diplomats around the world. They make movies about these guys going around and assassinating Middle Eastern diplomats around the world, these Mexican drug cartels. Don't we all know how good they are at that? So that makes a lot of sense in the beginning, right? Now, given all this situation about Fast and Furious, this is looking like something that got ginned up in the middle of all the Fast and Furious and the gun walking. And by the way, CBS is saying that subpoena for Eric Holder from Congress is imminent right now. So I'm sure Eric Holder is looking for some way that he can kind of get out of that whole embarrassing public thing about Fast and Furious. So he comes up with this story about, ooh, we've got Iranian terrorists here. And frankly, he's jumped the shark. And so has the entire U.S. government as far as I'm concerned. You go out on the corporate media websites and you look at the comments in there, and yes, there's the inevitable flood of public relations shields saying, oh, yes, we must go after Iran now. And interlaced with those are all these ordinary Americans saying, come on, this is absurd. This is absolutely absurd. This is the U.S. government's little boy who cried Iran moment. Every time something is going bad, they go, oh, Iran, 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 Iran. And I want you to go out there as you see these stories out there in the corporate media. Just go out there and say, come on. We all remember, all the other lies about Iran. And we all know how desperate the government is to distract from Occupy America and the economy and the wars and their obeisance to Israel and all this other stuff that they've done wrong over the last 30 years. And so they're going to pull a stunt from the height of the Cold War. Let's create another enemy there. Now, we know this is all USDA choice bovine excrement. And by the way, I think they're crossbreeding that bull with a dinosaur to get poo this big and stinky. This whole so-called Iranian plot is an old story. They knew about it in May of 2011. President Obama was briefed about it back in June. This is not a breaking story. They just decided to make it a big deal today because they're desperate for anything that will take your attention off of Occupy America. This is an act of utter desperation here. And it's not going to stop just with waving more phony, ginned-up terrorists at you. They're back to trying to sell you a war with Iran. How do we know that? Well, because they just, Israel's obviously hit the panic button on this situation. They're going to go out there and say, oh, we got to go after Iran, we got to do this. Only a week ago, Time magazine was saying, is Israel contemplating an attack on Iran's power station? Yeah, I think they are. Because after all, I mean, if you think about it, even if you accept this story at face value, isn't it up to Saudi Arabia to respond to this? It's their ambassador, and no crime was actually committed. It's just talk. And yet we're being told that Obama has convened with his National Security Council to deal with the Iranian crisis. Doesn't get more obvious than that. Now, they're already talking about sanctions. We're going to put the economic screws to Iran. We're going to use this to go around the world and steal all of Iran's money from their banks because we're morally right and they're terrible people. And, of course, sanctions aren't really going to do all that much because I rather doubt Iran has a lot of money left in this country because they've seen this coming for a long time. Other countries will go on doing business with them. So you know what the actual result of these sanctions are going to be? You will pay a lot more for gas and oil at the gas station because supplies are going to start getting a lot shorter and tighter. Because American oil companies are not going to be allowed to buy oil from Iran. Because we've got to teach them what for. So that's what's going to go on. Now, the U.S. may go to the United Nations and try and impose international sanctions. That will go nowhere because Russia and China are going to veto, just like they vetoed this effort to go into Syria. Russia and China have drawn a line saying we've let the U.S. and Israel sort of be the little neighborhood bullies for long enough. We got to calm things down. So that's what they're going to do here. So they're not going to accomplish anything at the United Nations. I don't know. Maybe Israel's going to set off a nuclear bomb in the U.S. and try and blame Iran for it. Okay, but we know that this is all about getting Iran on behalf of Israel. Remember, 2 years ago they were trying that coup d'etat where they wanted to put the son of the Shah of Iran back on the throne. The U.S. has a long history of constantly overthrowing the democratically elected government of Iran and a lot of other countries and putting in these puppet rulers, just like we're getting ready to do here in Libya. We've already done in Iraq and Afghanistan, or tried to do in Afghanistan. That's kind of fallen apart over there. Now, how do we know that they're talking about actually going to war with Iran? Because another article that came out today on CNN, new satellite imagery shows Iranian nuclear sites, watchdog group says. So this lobbying group in Washington, D.C. called the Institute for Science and International Security, and I'll let you go ahead and look up who funds them and who works for them, basically saying that they're examining updated commercial satellite imagery of Iran and found evidence of slow but continuing build-out of nuclear facilities. Horror of horrors! Oh my goodness! They've built tool sheds, and then they've built garages. They built a cafeteria. It's the end of the world. Start the war right now. Now we've already been through this once before in Iraq, when the American media, as obeisant to Israel then as now, showed us all photos of bakeries in Iraq and insisted they were biological weapons laboratories, photos of fire trucks that were claimed to be decontamination devices, and British-made weather balloon inflators we were all told were mobile biological weapons laboratories. So we've been down this road once before. Fool me once, shame on me. No, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We've been down this road before. We've been down this primrose path before. We were lied into the war in Iraq. Now they're trying to repeat the lies to get us into Iran. Why? Because they don't know how to handle the Occupy America movement. They're scared out of their minds. If Occupy America succeeds, Israel loses their automatic access to all of your wallets. Israel loses control of the American military machine. Did you know that Israel has direct control over America's nuclear arsenal? They could turn a key in Tel Aviv and launch an American nuclear missile. That's how insane this is. And, of course, Israel can only get away with doing what they do to their neighbors because anybody complains to the United Nations, it goes to the Security Council, and the U.S. will stand up and go, veto, 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 veto. Not allowed to say anything bad about Israel, no matter how evilly they behave, because we're still atoning for the Holocaust. which of course is nonsense. We had nothing to do with the Holocaust. That was a government that is no longer around in a country, not this one, on a continent on the other side of the world. And it's just completely nonsense. And right now they're rushing to start a war with Iran by any means possible in order to keep control over you and your money and your children. We'll be right back after these commercials. Meanwhile, since 1979, when Iran became an Islamic republic, the United States has, officially a secular nation, but predominantly Christian. We attacked El Salvador, Libya, Sinai, Lebanon, Egypt, Grenada, Honduras, Chad, Persian Gulf, Libya, Bolivia, Iran, Persian Gulf again, Kuwait, Iran, Honduras, Panama, Libya, Panama again, Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru, all at the same time, Philippines, Panama, Liberia, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. It's a long, long list, and I have it published at whatreallyhappened.com. Of the three countries, Iran, Israel, and the United States of America, the only one not murdering and killing people in other countries in mass quantities is Iran. But Israel says you must go kill them for us, and now that Israel is feeling their influence in the United States on the wane because of the Occupy movement, they've hit the panic button. I would not put it past Israel to stage a massive false flag attack in the United States of America, or to simply go on out and bomb Iran's nuclear power station, like they did the one at Osirik up in Iraq. And Israel claimed that they were building nuclear bombs underneath this power station. That was their justification for invading another country and blowing up a power station. And following the invasion of Iraq in 2003, international experts inspected the ruins of the Osirik power station, and they found a power station and absolutely no indications of any kind of a clandestine nuclear weapons lab. Now, I want to make a point here that everybody needs to remember about this whole Iran nuclear weapon thing. Iran has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and abides by all its rules and regulation, including inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Israel has not. Israel refuses inspections of its facilities at Dimona. The United States has also signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and under Article 4 of that treaty, the United States is obligated to help Iran build its power station. Now, if the issue was really about whether or not Iran is building a clandestine nuclear weapons laboratory in the basement of their power station, the easiest way to make sure is for the United States to go on over there and help pour the concrete foundations and lay the wiring and weld the pipes and basically help build the thing as they are obligated to do under the treaty. But as I said before, this isn't about Iran having a nuclear weapon, which even if they had, they're not going to use that on anybody. They know the United States would turn their entire country into green glass if they did. This is about the U.S. being ordered by Israel to go make war on all the countries that Israel doesn't like, and unfortunately it's a very long list. And Iran is next, and Israel is feeling if they don't get the war with Iran going right now, they're going to lose their window of opportunity. And so they're really pushing this thing. Like I said, only a week ago, Time magazine was saying, is Israel again contemplating an attack on Iran's power station? Pat Buchanan also wrote an article on the same thing about a week and a half ago over at antiwar.com. This is how the United States government is going to distract everybody from Occupy America, from the economy, from the wars, from Fast and Furious, which is shaping up to be the new Iran-Contra. They're going to start a war. This is how the U.S. government gets out of the messes they create for themselves. A new war. And folks, war with Iran is going to mean war with Russia. And I don't want American children dying horrible deaths in the deserts of the Mideast in a war with Russia just to please little tiny Israel. Because Israel is too psychotic to learn how to get along with their neighbors. We're on the edge here. We're on the edge. Yesterday I said there's no turning back. The Occupy movement had put the fear of revolution into the power elite of this country and of Israel, and this is their response. Pay no attention to those protesters in the street. We got to go kill Iranians. That's how they're going to solve their problem. They are hoping that Americans will be just as dumb as they have been in the past. where the government starts a war and we forget all about the things the government has done wrong, and we salute the flag and we throw our children and our money onto the enemy's bayonets as hard as we can. I hope we have evolved to be a little smarter than that. We'll be back after these commercials.